Castology.
Welcome to Castology, a podcast about podcasts. I, for the first time, am your host, Harry George Wallace. This is going to be interesting, everyone. Strap yourselves in, because for the first time, I'm behind the wheel, and who knows what could happen.
Do you have a license?
No, not at all,
God.
in any sense. So, yeah, I'm going to stumble through this. Please bear with me if there are some mistakes or falters. If necessary, I will throw to our experienced guide, Zane C. Weber, here with us today.
Yep, that's me. I'm here.
Yep.
I'm not going to make this easy for you, though.
Good. Excellent.
You could basically be Patrick Swayze and Ghost, though, and guide with your hands as he creates something beautiful.
I'm not sure. Would you be comfortable with that?
I am comfortable with a lot. As you can tell by the fact I'm here hosting this podcast.
Yeah, the look on your face, though, screamed like, I am writing checks that I'm not willing to cash.
No, you'll know when that happens. Speaking of other hosts, across the table from me we have...
Brittany Taylor Hetherington.
Wonderful. And our experienced host, I'll get you to say your name again just for fun.
Zane C. Weber.
The three amigos are here to review podcast once again. Shall we begin by going through our podcast that we are recommending this time round?
I guess.
Let's start. Well, just for that, Britt,
No!
we're starting with you.
That's how we show affection and love.
What are you recommending this week?
So I'm recommending Articles of Interest. So it's a very short podcast series, but it's kind of like, I guess, history about clothing, fashion type stuff. So I'm often not interested, in standard history types, but I quite like art history when it comes to like paintings, etc., as well as obviously the fashion sense. So even though it was a short-lived series, I got a lot out of it, and it is no longer producing them. I quite liked that it brought in other people from different points of view. They weren't always in a conversational style, which meant I suppose some things could be taken out of context. But all the same, it seemed like it was relatively, open about its sources, etc. I especially quite liked the history of the suit. There was a Beau Brummel, I think, episode where it discussed men's fashion and how they ended up being quite boring.
Interesting.
Do you think that they took things out of context? Or is it just kind of like, technically they could have, because it's not an interview, it's a sampling?
Yeah, no, that's just me being paranoid.
Okay.
So I was like,
Sure.
It was a mesh of information, and I did appreciate that it wasn't, just one dry opinion, and it did seem like it was relatively credible sources.
Yeah.
But I was aware of the fact that, it could be taken out of context.
Yeah, because this is...
history is in the words of the victor or whatever, but...
And the victor was men's wear.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly wasn't women's wear, because they'd have pockets.
Oh, please.
So this is a series from another podcast called 99% Invisible.
Is
Yes,
it really?
I was gonna say-
Again?
They've released this separately.
Oh,
so
thank
it's
God.
but 99% Invisible is a very famous podcast for doing very interesting things. So I'm very much looking forward to this.
Yes, I had the same thought. I did see that it was by 99% Invisible, and immediately I was like, wonderful. Almost guaranteed to be a good time.
Absolutely. I really was very engaged, and it's unusual, again, for history for myself. So, yeah.
Exciting. All right. Well, let's throw to Zane. Now, just from the title, this is going to be a Zane podcast recommendation, isn't it?
No, actually.
Oh.
I mean, yes, it is a history podcast.
Yes.
But it is a very kind of quirky, light-hearted, scripted kind of presentation of history. It's not dry. It's definitely not what I would call Zane dry. So Ballsy history it comes from 4 women from one family who started it as it's 2 women or 3 women. 4 women is too many. They're gonna get all clucky, and someone's gonna have a baby.
Yep, that's how it happens. Every party I go to.
No, so this started as a COVID project for 4 women in a family, and it's turned into a really great podcast. They kind of focus on like the quirkier parts of history. Like one of the most like approachable episodes of theirs, I think, is just like different iterations of the Tooth Fairy and how recent that is.
Sure, okay.
Because like there have been stories usually about like mice who like take kids' teeth when they're done with them. But yeah, the Tooth Fairy has only really been around since kind of around the time that Walt Disney started making movies.
So it's not real, is what you're saying.
Okay, that sounds like fun.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
Yes.
Yeah, there's mythology. That's
No, I just meant the Tooth Fairy isn't real.
that you know.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it's kind of like just taking weird little bits of history and presenting it. So they're all fairly short, like between 10 and 20 minutes.
I love a short king.
Yeah, and so it's really, really approachable. There's no kings here, only queens.
Okay, that's allowed to.
So unfortunate for you. So
lovely.
that's ballsy history. So I wouldn't class this as a very Zane podcast. This is actually a little bit too kitschy for me to binge. I very much enjoy one episode listening a week, but I wouldn't be able to binge this podcast.
Well,
Do you think
wonderful.
the fact that it was originated during COVID, do you think that influenced its presentation style or mood at all?
I think the fact that they're all related means that they're kind of comfortable being weird and quirky with each other.
Sure,
And
yeah,
there is that kind of feeling of in-jokes, but there aren't actual in-jokes.
Okay.
Because they're not like talking to each other. They just kind of take turns presenting a story.
Oh, like a book
Potentially a
club.
bit of a my brother, and me feel.
No, so there's no actual interview or interaction. Mostly
It's all storytelling.
yeah, it's scripted.
Okay.
So and there's like background music.
Right,
and,
right.
Yeah, so it's really kind of presented rather than like four people sitting around a table sharing stories with each other.
Yeah, that's exciting. I'm
Quite
looking
interesting.
forward to listening to it.
Yes, I love kitschy.
Wonderful. My recommendation for the week is... Oh, I've just lost my place. Where is it? There we go. Is Normal Gossip. Now, I picked Normal Gossip specifically for you, Britt.
You did tell me the other day and I was very excited.
I saw it there and I was like, I want to give this a listen. And I got halfway through the first episode and I was like, this is a Brit podcast.
Excellent.
Whether that
That's
will be
nice.
whether that will be
Yeah.
ratified, whether that will hold to be the truth, we will find out. Normal Gossip is an exploration of what gossip means in society, to people, on a psychological level, what purpose it serves to us as both a storytelling device and a psychosocial thing.
A way to
Out of words
connect,
there.
a way to
Psychosocial thing.
connect
Yep.
with each other, you mean?
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, for sure. So I really enjoyed it. Now, for context, I despise gossip. I am one of those people.
You listen to mine so well, though.
I do. Yeah, maybe I actually like gossip much more than I think I do. But I hate drama. That should be.
That's a good distinction.
Yeah, for sure. However, I got halfway through the first episode of Normal Gossip and I was like, I'm thinking about this concept in ways that I've never thought about it before. And purely for that reason alone, I have recommended it. It is, the hosts are witty and charming in a very American podcast way, but it's not digestible. So yeah, I'm looking forward
It's
to
not digestible.
Yes, I'm going to straight.
very
I
important.
am the host here,
Yeah.
Zane. I will double negative if I wish.
Sure. I mean, why not just quadruple negative? It has the same effect.
I might not do that.
And it's more words.
Yeah.
Mum, Dad,
This
don't
is how
fight.
I write all of my essays. Wonderful. Okay.
I was
Shall
going
we?
to ask, actually, Harry.
Yes, Brett.
Yes, Harry. So thanks, Harry. I was wondering, in terms of the lines of it being gossip and you saying you dislike drama versus gossip, do you think
Sure.
it matches more from a drama perspective then, or does it follow just more like playful stories that don't impact you?
I think it talks about all aspects in it. So it's, sorry, I should also contextualize here. It talks about gossip as a phenomenon, but the idea of it is that it is people talking about stories from other people who they have no connection to. So they will tell
okay.
of an
Right.
episode, they
Yeah.
will tell a gossip story that of people that you don't know, that even the host potentially do not know. And you will take that beautiful schadenfreude from it that gossip brings. Potentially is the idea.
Yeah.
I found that was pretty much the case. I quite enjoyed it. I think Britt will really enjoy it. I will be interested to hear what Zane thinks of it.
Yes, the ultimate arbiter.
Oh, gosh.
Zane.
Probably just potentially the one who I think might not enjoy it, but maybe you will. Who knows?
We just dance different dance styles, but we're all dancing, Zane.
I'm mostly disabled, so
I flail at best, off the beat most times.
It still counts.
Moving on, those were our recommendations for this week. Let's go back into the podcast that we are now going to review from last week.
Nice toit.
We have to start. Well, you know what? Just for that,
look at me. I've got to fill the dead air, Brit.
It's not attention seeking if it's anxiety ridden, is it?
I'm going to enjoy doing this a lot. Yeah,
my
well,
God.
too bad you're doing it.
Well, you know what? One day it'll be my turn, and then we'll see.
No.
See, Harry.
What did you recommend last week, Britt?
I recommended the worst idea of all time.
And what did we think of that, Zane?
This is the epitome of a kind of podcast that was rife about 5 years ago.
Oh,
when
yeah.
This started. Kind of before COVID, where this is a COVID podcast, but before COVID, where it is just two guys who think they're funny, like, let's just do a podcast. This is a really great idea. Well, no, because people are only going to do it. If people don't think they're funny, they're not going to do a comedy podcast.
I suppose that's fair. I was going to be like, tell us what you really think.
No, I think they're very funny, funny guys. I despise the concept. As someone who like really enjoys movies.
Yes. As an actor.
Even as a consumer mostly. Actively watching bad cinema that you don't like over and over again feels like the worst kind of torture paired with making it a job for a podcast. Seems vicariously makes me just like feel so weary on the inside. In reality, they're very funny, and if you're like doing something else and they're just kind of companionably chatting around in the background, perfectly fine. This is great, like driving podcast. Perhaps if you buy into this relationship and you feel like you connect to them, they're very amiable New Zealand guys. Like they talk about their various illnesses at the time, which is alternatively funny and gross. Yeah, so this is a perfectly fine podcast. But
I don't know them, so it doesn't hurt me that much.
Yeah. And this podcast is the example that a lot of people use, going like, this podcast exists, so I can do that. I was like, this podcast exists because these people are genuinely good at what they do and
probably
good
already
at
had a following.
Yeah, well, I don't know if they had a following before this, but this podcast definitely got a lot of shout outs on bigger podcasts. Be like, these poor guys who are watching this movie every day.
So maybe if you were a sadist, you'd enjoy it a bit more as they go through, I guess, that trauma cycle.
Mean, that's the thing. If I personally hate the idea of having to rewatch a movie that I hated watching, because watching a movie that I hate watching is an unpleasant experience. Why would I want to do that over and over and over again?
Could I ask what your favorite is as a point of reference then for what you constitute
my favorite movie?
Yeah.
Now apparently we're judging Zane's taste.
I am.
My four that I feature on Letterboxd.
Yes.
Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2.
Oh, yes.
Pan's Labyrinth.
Ooh.
Doctor Strangelove.
Yeah,
and
nice.
What is the other one? And Birdman.
That's a good top four. Birdman's an interesting addition. I wouldn't have picked that. I do. The cinephile in me enjoys the fact that you put Kill Bill 1 and 2 together because that's what Tarantino does.
They're the same text. People who like one and don't like the other, like, it doesn't make sense. Yes, they're released as separate movies, whatever.
Yeah. He saw them as one movie.
Tarantino makes great movies, is a terrible human. I'm acknowledging that.
Oh, yeah. Well, the art from the artist, we'll have that debate another time.
But what did you think about this one, Harry?
I enjoyed it to a degree. Here's my gripe with this kind of podcast. It paves the way for a lot of unfunny 20-something white men to make more podcasts.
Okay.
And I think that these two are funny, but it really is, as Zane said, it is the classic podcast that people listen to and are like, I could do that.
Yeah.
And they're not correct.
Yeah.
As someone who has started their own podcast and is a 20-something white man, maybe this is a look into the mirror of society. However, I think because of the weariness that I have with this format, I did potentially not enjoy it as much as I could have. However, I do enjoy a good podcast that is about the dynamic between the people. If you buy into the vibe, I personally did not vibe with the host as much as I would have to really enjoy a podcast like this. The concept,
I love the concept.
I don't hate the concept. I think the concept is fine. I think it's an excuse to have two funny people talk. It didn't particularly do anything for me. Similar to Zane, it does make the movie buff in me quiver and quake a little bit. I gave it a solid fine out of 10.
That's respectable.
Yep, it was fine.
I genuinely enjoyed it, but I think my main issue was in terms of the way that the podcasts were displayed, say for instance in Spotify, is it was hard to ascertain where one grouping of a movie started and finished.
Yeah.
That was my primary issue. But
honestly, I think most of that comes from the fact that they have grown so much from that original concept. So now they're doing episodes about TV and they've got guest spots of other people coming on and doing that aren't the main conceit.
Yeah, sure.
So it does kind of muddy the waters a little bit.
Yeah, it disoriented me a bit, but then once I had a firm footing, I did quite like it. But I did realize there was parts where I was like, get to the point. But again, this is something more so that I just casually listen to.
It's a background
as
podcast.
Opposed to feeling like I've got half an hour.
Yeah.
How do I make the most of that half hour?
Solid recommendation. All right. Zane, let's talk about Drilled.
Okay, so Drilled is a true crime podcast about climate change and climate action, I guess, or the lack thereof, which was hosted and reported by Amy Westvelt. Launched in 2017, has been going strong ever since. I called it an anger-making podcast. I called it maybe a bit too dry for your tastes. How well did I predict the outcome?
I really enjoyed Drilled.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was just produced enough for my taste that I could listen to it and enjoy it. The information was interesting, and it did what, in my opinion, all good journalism does, which was reveal a facet of something that I thought I knew things about, but there was a deeper level. Started listening to the first episodes when it first started out, which, can you just do me a favor? Do you happen to remember what the first few were about?
That is a good question. Keep talking and I will find them.
Regardless, I started listening to it and I was like, I didn't know these particular things. This is a cause that I am passionate about. It is well produced. I enjoy listening to the sound of it. In contrast to some of the other history podcasts that you've already recommended, I found it quite listenable. I thoroughly enjoyed Drilled and I would recommend it to others.
Yeah, so season 1 was the origins of climate denial, how there was a lot of climate research going on in the 70s and 80s, conducted by oil research companies that just kind of like
oh, wow, okay,
didn't get released for some reason.
I didn't realize that.
There's a lot of really interesting history to this kind of thing. That this, I did already know about this, but I really enjoy this track of history. Is that climate change was not always anathema to conservatives.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
Like previous presidents had very progressive climate change policies, and it wasn't until it became a business thing, it wasn't until it became capitalized that it started to become a conservative
that's when conservatives were more about the farming and rural base
rather
than business base. That's where that shifted from, because obviously environmentalism favors the farmers because you want healthy water, you want healthy land.
Versus doing it as like an extremist thing. These people have crazy ideas.
Exactly right, yeah.
I tell the story often, this is just a brief aside, but I have a friend who is rural. I went to sometimes wonder myself. I went to a rural boarding school, and one of the people I keep in touch from there is a farmer. He's a very salt of the earth man. And we had a big chat about politics one night, and he votes Liberal because his parents voted Liberal and his grandparents voted Liberal ad nauseum. But, we kind of had it was like, you know climate change is real. And it's like, yeah, we see it on the farms all
Yeah.
the time. It was like, I also know for a fact that you really enjoy smoking weed. And he was like, yeah, I do. I was like, cool. So why aren't you voting for the Greens?
Yeah.
Yeah, gosh.
It's the cognitive dissonance that I really enjoy. I don't know whether he changed his mind from that conversation, but yes, this podcast was good because it changes it changes and reveals things about this particular subject. So I enjoyed it. Britt, what did you think?
For myself, it was hard for me to listen to, but I didn't hate it. I will say I
A glowing
Strong
recommendation.
commendation.
Yeah.
no, I'll tell you why. I found it genuinely interesting after I was able to attend to it. So
Yeah,
I tried to
yeah.
listen to the same episode a total of 4 times. I kept a tally, just for a point of reference. And I don't know if it was the time of the night. I think it was just the fact it was a lot of content. Yeah, so it took me a bit to latch onto it, but I did still find elements interesting in terms of, how, I guess, within society, the current branding of environmentalists reached that what it is today. It also, I think, even discussed, bringing environmental issues as being viewed as an extremist thing, even through exposure in schools, which I found almost grotesque. They said that they had like advertisements almost playing in classrooms where it would brand almost like an annoying female voice telling you off and telling you not to enjoy the things you love, like technology, etc. I also quite liked that it did kind of encroach upon the issues of almost like environmental purists, whereas, you're not allowed to care for the environment if you like your mobile phone type thing.
Yeah,
It actually
yeah.
discussed
Gatekeeping.
like-
Exactly, as opposed to viewing like the overarching things that people can do to make a
Yeah.
primary difference, as opposed to like as Harry said, gatekeeping.
Yeah, awesome. So, again, similar to what Harry said, like the reason I really like this podcast is because it does take something that even people who is very engaged with climate action and the climate action dialogue that's happening, it will give you new data and new ideas and uncover new facets of the whole area that you haven't understood before or been exposed to before.
Definitely made me more conscious of I guess the media that I take in and how that might influence my opinion with respect to things. I know it's hard to not have an element of bias just from walk of life, but it was just a good consideration, I think, for myself.
Wonderful.
Awesome. I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
I think you should be. Excellent recommendation. My friends, what did we think of Reply All?
I liked it a lot. I realised... Sorry, I'm just going to talk.
Do
I
it.
can't stop.
It's a podcast.
I realised, my friend Harry, that you've played this in my car before for like road trips, etc.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that
Yeah.
checks out. Yeah.
And there was a particular episode that I remember caught my interest when you first played it, because I remember I really enjoyed it, but I kind of almost forgot it in the time that passed. Was to do with like someone remembering what was a really famous song lyric. And like they were singing it, I think, in front of a partner or something. And then they were like, what is that? And they were sure.
Yes, this was an excellent episode.
Yeah.
This is the one where they took this person's vague memory of a song and recreated the song and like professionally recorded his memory of the song, and then they couldn't find it. It was like he had this incredibly specific memory of this song from the 90s. To the point where he was able to do a professional recording of it with genuine session musicians.
Yeah.
And then they tried to hunt down where the song was because it just disappeared off the face of the planet. It was on no streaming services, no radio. And eventually they found it and put the two together. And it was uncanny just how well it worked. But yeah, sorry to run over the top of
No,
you,
that's
Brett, but
okay.
I didn't remember.
That explained it in a good way, I think, because you're the one that originally introduced me to it. So, it also made me feel like it was like Reddit, the podcast, where it just had fun facts and everyone was kind of chipping in.
Yep.
Which I guess kind of lends to the reply all component of, online emailing and message board type stuff. But I just really appreciated, I guess, the depth and dedication that they did to hunt down, I guess the end result or outcome of where these things originated or the story behind them. And everyone that they actually brought in too was just as equally excited about the fact that it was a problem to solve.
Yeah.
You felt like a part of the excitement because everyone else was as equally invested.
Zane, you have definitely listened to this podcast before.
Oh, yeah.
I recommended it. What do you think of
I
the
think
podcast.
Reply All, in the same way that the worst idea of all time is the epitome of like a style of podcast, I think Reply
Yes.
All is as well. And I think it's going to be something that's going to not exist in the same way for a long time. Simply because I think this kind of epitomizes the podcast produced well, where you're taking like these weird kind of fringe ideas that are happening on the internet and you kind of bring them into the mainstream and explore them really thoroughly to the point where they then feel popular. Reply All is a phenomenon, and I think it's an underappreciated phenomenon because every episode in this you will have heard of somewhere if you're an internet citizen, if you exist on the internet in any in any thorough sense, if you're like checking feeds daily and that sort of thing. So I think Reply All, even though it has now ended, is still going to be very popular in the years coming. Like, go back and there's going to be heaps of episodes that you find. Like, I haven't listened to them all, and just scrolling through, I was like, oh, I need to listen to a few more of these. I need to go back and listen. Reply All is a very strong recommend. I think now that it's ended, if you haven't listened to it, now's the time, because you're not going to have to catch up.
Yes, for sure. Would definitely recommend trawling back through the back catalogue, and even just there'll be recommendations of highlights. Some are on the internet. Definitely worth checking out the best of them. I will say, as we talked about previously on the podcast, the way it ended is contentious in a way. You might wish to do your own research and form your own opinions if you intend on listening to you. If this is something that bothers you, maybe read into the circumstances and make your own judgments. Wonderful. Yeah. So to backtrack, this episode we have recommended Normal Gossip.
Yeah, you recommended Normal Gossip.
From me.
Yeah.
I recommended it for my dear friend Britt.
Thank you so
we will
much.
see what you all think of that next time. It is
Oh, I have a friend. Her name is Britt.
Yeah.
Who is she? Tell me.
Gross. No, it's a podcast about gossip, and the host tell the gossip to each other through disconnected circumstances about people you have never met, but you get to enjoy the intimate details of their triumphs and tragedies. Zane, what did you recommend?
I recommended Ballsy History, which is a history podcast that is presented in a rather whimsical way by 4 women who are all related, and it started as a COVID project. It's definitely not the most overproduced podcast, but it's definitely lots of fun to listen to, and the topics are all very quirky and fun.
Wonderful. Britt, what did you recommend?
I recommended Articles of Interest, and it's basically, I guess, look at history pertaining to fashion. I think their precise wording for it is it's a show about what we wear. So it's my favourite type of history, where it's a bit artistic, and I learnt something that I didn't think I would.
Super exciting. All right. Is that us, Zane? Are we done?
That's it.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Zane.
I don't know the URL off the top of my head, so if you'd be
That's
so kind.
not canon.com/castology.
You can find us there. There's a form you can fill in which will let you recommend podcasts for us to listen to. We will listen to them. We may recommend them. No guarantees, so that's just how life works. Podcasts are excellent. Keep listening to podcasts.